Hey, and welcome to this episode of the Legal Paige podcast. So recently we've been getting tons of questions over here at TLP regarding cancellations, monkeypox, cue the horrific flashbacks to 2020, public health emergencies, and just clients wanting to change their event date yet again. And I know as your online lawyer that not every situation is a force majeure event. But your clients may not know that, and you may not know how to articulate that in a very kind manner to them. So that's what I'm going to talk about on today's episode. What is a public health emergency and what is a force majeure event, and when the two do not intersect? Let me paint a picture of what emails have looked like in our customer support inbox lately. So a photographer booked a couple earlier this year to shoot their wedding. As the countdown grew closer to the big day, the monkeypox outbreak started to really spread across the United States. Public health emergencies were declared recently, and then the client started to spiral more and more. And when I say spiral, I mean they email, call, text, DM, and are doing everything possible to try to cancel their event with their service provider, and here it being the photographer. The client stated that because it's a national emergency, they need to be let out of the contract right now. Despite this photographer's best customer service skills, the clients keep persisting that they need to cancel. They state that it is a force majeure event. They can't, conduct their event as they had planned, and they're really just stating anything to get out of the contract. So put yourself in this photographer's shoes. What are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to refund the client the total amount and just cancel and move forward? Are you supposed to take a huge loss as you've already turned down multiple other inquiries for that date because you were already booked with this particular couple? And as a service provider, what legal leg do your clients actually have to stand on here? And what is your best legal argument against them saying that this is a force majeure event when you kind of know in your gut that this isn't the same as a regular force majeure event that you know about in your mind? So really the question here is, when is a national public health emergency cause for cancellation under your contract? Is it just under your cancellation policies, or is it an actual force majeure event? Now, I want to be clear here. This episode is for all business owners, not just photographers, but also videographers and planners and graphic designers and DJs and caterers and anyone really in still this wedding and event industry where clients are really trying to pull that force majeure card at every step of the way if one hiccup occurs or one thing is said on the news. So I'm going to go into detail about what actually is a public health emergency and when does force majeure really apply. Specifically, why in this certain instance, that's not the case. And what to do ultimately when your client wants to cancel in scenarios like this. All right, legal pagers, so buckle up because it's time to dive into this, and hopefully it doesn't have you feeling too much PTSD from COVID and 2020. You're listening to the Legal Paige podcast, where we chat about life and business with a legal twist. I'm Paige, attorney and photographer helping online businesses and creatives tackle their business dreams without breaking out in hives. No more legal mumbo jumbo. This podcast features simple, bite-sized advice that'll have you legally legit in no time. Are you ready? Let's get started. As a reminder, before we get into this episode, I am legally obligated to give my disclaimer. I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney. All legal information I talk about in this episode is intended for the masses and a large variety of different businesses. Please seek out another attorney in your city and home state if you need specific legal advice related to your unique business. Okay, let's get back to it. I want to start off today explaining what a public health emergency is, how it's declared, and then at what point does a public health emergency affect your contract? So let's get into it. A public health emergency is declared by the Secretary of Health and Human Services when determining that a disease may be of public concern. Most public health emergencies have an expiration of 90 days, but then they can be extended if the secretary feels that it's appropriate. Now, when a public health emergency is declared, it opens up more funding for vaccinations, a quicker response time, and additional federal resources. Basically, it fast tracks the issue, and this is why they declare such things. So on August 4th, 2022, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Secretary declared monkeypox a public health emergency nationwide, okay? And it went out in the news. This is where people start getting a little bit, antsy. For those of you who don't know, monkeypox is defined by the CDC, Center for Disease Control, as, quote, a rare disease caused by infection with the monkeypox virus. Monkeypox virus is a part of the same family of viruses as the variola virus, the virus that causes smallpox. So monkeypox symptoms are similar to smallpox symptoms, but milder, and monkeypox is rarely fatal. Now, monkeypox usually appears in the form of a rash. That's just something to note. So if it is such a rare disease and rarely fatal, you're probably wondering why the federal government decided to declare it a public emergency. Well, in the last few weeks, the U.S. has seen this significant uptick in cases that has caused some concern. Currently, there are approximately, at the time of this recording, 7,500 cases in the United States, and we're seeing those numbers rise. However, right now, there is a vaccination for monkeypox, but there is limited supply, which is causing a shortage in hospitals and pharmacies. And so by declaring monkeypox a public emergency, the Biden administration put the disease in the number one line for funding, and it prioritized the production of the monkeypox vaccine. All right, so now that you have the lowdown on what's going on and what a public health emergency is and why the federal government declares such things, let's get into what you really want to know as a service provider in the event industry across the United States. Is this COVID 2.0? And how is it going to affect your relationship with your clients and, of course, your contractual commitments? I personally know if you're anything like me and my team here at TLP, you might have a little bit of post-traumatic stress disorder from this hitting the national news and thinking immediately like, oh my gosh, is this another COVID? What am I supposed to do? My clients are starting to reach out, or do I need to reach out to my clients and let them know what is going to happen with this whole monkeypox thing? Let me reassure you that just because the White House declares the public health emergency due to the monkeypox does not mean that we're in the same situation as we were in 2020. I am no health expert. I need to disclaim that. But I can say with certainty as an attorney that this point in the monkeypox trajectory in the United States here in 2022, it is not the same level as COVID-19 in 2020. So COVID-19 was this new disease that health experts had not dealt with before, like at all. It spread fast, it could not be contained easily, and as you know, millions died across the entire world from COVID-19 in a very short period of time. Health experts didn't have a solution to COVID-19 for an entire year, and there was no vaccine. It had to be made from scratch. So COVID-19 was literally the definition of a true pandemic, which led to worldwide shutdowns. That's really important here, and I'm going to get into it in a second. Overall, COVID-19 was really this ultra pandemic event, and I would be shocked if something like that ever happened again in our lifetime. On the flip side, monkeypox has been around since at least 1970, and the FDA approved the first live non-replicating vaccine to prevent smallpox and monkeypox in 2019. So monkeypox is not a new disease. Monkeypox is not spreading as fast as COVID-19 because it's spread through close, personal, often skin-to-skin contact, and it's not an airborne disease like COVID. So shutdowns have not been declared by any country at this point in time, let alone the United States. And I doubt the United States would ever do shutdowns because of monkeypox, because of all of the solutions in place for monkeypox currently. So far, there have only been 5 deaths in the United States from monkeypox, despite the rising cases and concerns in the news. But just because I say that, I need to be clear here. Monkeypox is a serious issue. I'm not trying to downgrade the issue whatsoever, but it is different than COVID-19. And at this point, it shouldn't be treated like COVID was treated in 2020. It's also important to remember that not every public health emergency declared by the White House will end up becoming another pandemic, despite what your clients may want to tell you. And I think it's time now to get into how this really impacts your contracts with your clients. Many clients back in 2020 were able to cancel contracts for their event or their wedding during the beginning of 2019 by enacting their force majeure clause. And this is mainly because it was obviously unforeseeable, unpredictable, and the key word here is impossible to perform. Those three things have to be all true: unpredictable, unforeseeable, and impossible to perform for a force majeure clause to actually be enacted. And I'm hearing now from service providers in our TLP community on Facebook and in my DMs, and of course in our support inbox, that now service providers are having clients trying to do the same thing with the monkeypox outbreak. If I were to make a guess here, I would say that one, force majeure is now this, it kind of used to be an ominous clause that people knew was in a contract, but they didn't really know why. And since 2020, I feel like everybody knows what force majeure is, why that clause is in your contract. And now that clients are more apprised to this clause, they're trying to just invoke it for every which reason, which isn't the case legally. And I'm here to tell you that the monkeypox outbreak is not a force majeure event. And to be honest, most health emergencies declared by the White House are not force majeure events. Again, force majeure is only applicable for true out-of-the-blue acts of God events. Particularly, force majeure clauses were put into effect for events like tornadoes and hurricanes and wildfires and avalanches, basically events that no one could have determined or dreamed of or imagined that would basically wipe out an entire venue or wipe out an entire city, wipe out all modes of transportation and communication, power lines, so on and so forth, so that it would be impossible to perform by one or all of the parties to the contract. Now, as I say that, I'm sure you're thinking, okay, Paige, that makes sense. Hurricanes, tornadoes, avalanches, wildfires, those would be true acts of God. You can also have war and terrorism and things along those lines qualify under force majeure events. But then why does such thing as COVID-19 also qualify as a force majeure event? Because at the very, very beginning, think March 2020, don't get too much PTSD by me saying that month out there out loud. March, April, May 2020, no one knew it was happening. We were all shut down. There was national shutdowns, worldwide shutdowns. Nobody could even leave their house. Of course, it was a force majeure event because there was a quick spread of the disease. There was an inability for contracts to be executed. People could not perform because people could literally not leave their house and be in person-to-person contact. And most importantly, the unforeseeability of COVID-19 was widely known. Nobody knew that COVID-19 was going to show up at the beginning of 2020. So even if your clients wanted to continue with their wedding in, say, April of 2020, they literally could not due to the shutdowns across the United States. That is the difference here. That is what qualified COVID-19 as a force majeure event, the impossibility of performance. Put that in the back of your head. Is it impossible for you to perform? If so, then you're probably in force majeure event territory. If you can perform, then you're not in force majeure event territory. You're probably in just general cancellation territory. And then here, I do need to note that the most important thing, legally speaking, is at the time of contracting with your clients, you as the business owner and your clients need to have this event be unforeseeable and unpredictable. And of course, COVID-19 was this pandemic that took over the world and shut everything down. And nobody had any idea of that when they contracted for your wedding and event in 2020 back in 2019 or even back in 2018. Nobody could have foreseen it. So the unforeseeability and unpredictability of COVID-19 also made it a very, very clear force majeure event. This is ultimately why clients were able to cry or declare force majeure and either try to modify the existing contract with either a complimentary reschedule. I know many of us in the wedding and event industry were doing that back in, those few months of 2020 that COVID took over the world. Or they would ultimately just try to cancel the contract and get at least some type of refund. Legal pagers, navigating a cancellation can be a nerve-wracking process to say the least, but TLP is here to help you every step of the way. A cancellation agreement will terminate and supersede any written and oral agreement between you and the clients and release you of any further obligation to your clients as the company. This cancellation contract gives you options to allow you to either keep fees paid, partially refund fees paid, or refund fees paid. There are quite a few options under this clause in our cancellation contract about how you are canceling. This contract gives you options to allow you to either keep all fees paid per their voluntary cancellation, partially refund fees paid due to XYZ circumstance, or refund the entirety of the fees paid by your clients for XYZ purposes. And you just want to write that all out in your cancellation contract. But our cancellation contract template also includes a waiver of claims and a confidentiality clause so that you can ensure your client does not come back later on with further additional claims or issues, and will keep your guys' termination agreement just between the two of you. You can get your cancellation contracts at thelegalpage.com/cancellation. And the cancellation bundle that we have put together for you is really an awesome 2-for-1. You get a cancellation contract for when your client voluntarily cancels, and you get a cancellation contract for if you need to cancel as the service provider for whatever, emergent reason. Again, you can go to thelegalpaige.com/cancellation. Now let's get back to the episode. Eventually, as we are at now in 2022, I am recording this in August of 2022, COVID-19 issues have become foreseeable and the force majeure clause became inapplicable. So there's really no world in which your clients at this point in time can use COVID-19 as a reason why they're enacting a force majeure clause, because COVID-19 is certainly foreseeable. Everybody knows that it's a predictable thing that could occur, somebody catching COVID-19. It's still a virus that's out there. It's still ever present, but it's not impossible to perform the event. Even if your clients were to get COVID-19, the impossibility there is probably very, very slim. And because you don't have, if it is even impossible, right? Like they're quarantined, they're very sick, they can't make the event. Just because it's impossible, there was still that predictability and foreseeability on the front end that makes it not a force majeure event. So hopefully that clears things up a little bit for clients that maybe get sick or their immediate family gets sick, them trying to say COVID is still a force majeure event. It's just not. Legally speaking, COVID is not a force majeure event. This is why you need to have a COVID clause in your contract, and or you need to have very, very clear cancellation terms surrounding if somebody gets sick. Now let's go back to monkeypox, August 2022. At this time, monkeypox is not the same unforeseeable level as COVID-19. There's no shutdowns occurring. There's nothing stopping your clients from executing their contract. And at this point, catching COVID-19, the flu, a cold, getting in an accident, or even getting monkeypox are all unfortunate but foreseeable events that your client can and may face when contracting with you. That's key here. They knew that at the time of contracting with you. The hard truth is that your clients may be searching for an easy way to cancel their contract without losing their retainer. Don't let them make monkeypox a valid excuse. Some things you definitely, though, need to have in your contract to help protect yourself from clients wanting to cancel on you or reschedule on you are protection clauses. So for the purposes of what I am talking about today, the three main protection clauses you need in your contract are your cancellation clause, your rescheduling clause, and a force majeure clause. Make sure in your cancellation clause that you have strict language that the retainer is non-refundable, and that if they cancel before a certain time, say 30 days, you need to have a notification period in there, that your clients owe you the entire balance due. TLP has tons of resources on how to communicate with clients about trying to cancel, but if you want to know how to handle cancellations like a pro, please go back and tune into episode 127 of the Legal Paige podcast. That'll walk you through the entire process of canceling like a service industry pro. Now, if your clients are wanting to cancel due to monkeypox, I would strictly enforce your cancellation clause. Don't let them bully you into using a force majeure clause when it's not applicable. And finally, if your clients decide to cancel their contract, just make sure that you're sending them a cancellation contract that ensures that everything is tied up at the end, that both parties know the terms of the cancellation and that the reason why they canceled is kept confidential. And of course, if there's any type of like partial refund that's occurring, that would be kept confidential between you two as well. I like to think of a cancellation or termination agreement as kind of the summary of how you guys are parting ways. It's sometimes like a settlement agreement, but it's mainly that the, X contract that was executed on X date is being canceled, that you're relieved of your performance obligations, that your client is relieved of further payment obligations, and if there's anything else that needs to occur, right? If there's any type of refund, if your clients are needing to get credit for something, so on and so forth. Everybody has kind of different cancellation procedures per facts and circumstances of their clients canceling. And this is why having it in an actual four-cornered contract is so important. Please don't just cancel in an email. It's just not sufficient, and I don't recommend it legally. I always see it lead to future legal situations or sticky situations or just client unhappiness down the road. Additionally, if you're not in the boat of, okay, I'm just going to full-blown cancel this contract due to my clients wanting to because of monkeypox, I'd rather just give the little bit of wiggle room here, ease my clients' fears, press the easy button for them and give your clients a choice to reschedule instead. Remind them that they always have that option if you want to take that route. You're not legally obligated to take that route. I want to be clear here. But some service providers just like to do that. They like to appease their clients to the best of their abilities. I think that, again, that's a facts and circumstances issue of when it would be appropriate to offer a complimentary reschedule. In most cases right now, I would say no. And if your clients are trying to strong arm you into invoking a force majeure event because of monkeypox, I would say that's absolutely not a reason to give them a complimentary reschedule. But there are situations where you may want to do that. If it is truly a concern for their health, and maybe they get monkeypox or a close family member gets monkeypox or, COVID-19 still right now, if they were to contract it, you could absolutely give them a reschedule until that risk of contracting the virus around close, people-to-people contact has subsided. Alas, I did briefly talk about here the cancellation clause that needs to be in your contract. You need a notification period. Your clients need to notify you in that time period of why they're canceling. If it's a voluntary cancellation, as this would be here, if they're trying to cancel for monkeypox concerns, then your cancellation procedures apply. Have they paid their entire balance? That is obviously the opportunity cost to you, which is why you can invoke that provision in your contract. And also not just a cancellation clause, but you may want to have a rescheduling clause in your contract as well. And I briefly discussed what a rescheduling policy could somewhat look like. Again, you want to have a notification procedure in your rescheduling clause when your clients need to notify you in advance of them voluntarily rescheduling. If you allow a reschedule, if there's a rescheduling fee applies, like an additional amount, or if they're just transferring everything over to the new date, if you give one complimentary reschedule, that all needs to be laid out in your cancellation and rescheduling policies. These are just your general cancellation and rescheduling policies. And then, of course, you need a force majeure clause. And the force majeure clause needs to state, in the event of an unforeseeable, unpredictable, and impossible to perform event that occurs, such as, and then you kind of expressly delineate what a force majeure event could be. Usually it's acts of God. You explained it, a pandemic, war, terrorism, so on and so forth. And then at the end of the clause, you usually explain that, okay, whoever the impacted party is needs to notify the non-impacted party within a certain period of time. Usually it's quickly after the force majeure event occurs, right? They should probably notify you as quickly as possible or within about 5 days that they've been so severely impacted that they can no longer perform, or vice versa. You can no longer perform and you're notifying them. And then what happens to fees paid? This is what was missing in force majeure clauses in 2020. And since then, most lawyers have revised force majeure clauses to have the then what at the end of your force majeure provision. So make sure at the very end of your force majeure clause that you explain to your clients what's going to happen to fees paid. Is there a full refund? I would suggest you don't put that in your force majeure clause. Instead, I would suggest that you transfer fees paid to another event that could occur once performance is able to happen by the impacted party. And usually they need to use that credit from you within usually about 12 months. Give it a decent amount of time for performance to reoccur. And then lastly, I did want to mention, you may want to explain to your clients right off the bat, if you're consistently having clients come back to you trying to invoke force majeure, then you need to go back to kind of your SOPs and workflow. And you may want to explain to your clients when sending the contract how force majeure works and when it's applicable so that they know they can't use this clause as an easy out of your contract. And you can really easily disclose that to them and have just a very, collegial conversation about that. Okay, and that's all I have for you today. What an episode. It was jam-packed with tons of good legal information. So I want to share the biggest takeaways with you and how you can make sure you're legally legit should this situation arise in your business. Number 1, monkeypox is not a force majeure event, and most public health emergencies are not force majeure events. Force majeure is only applicable for out of the blue acts of God like tornadoes, hurricanes, wildfires, war, terrorism, those type of things. Number 2, it is important to make sure you know your contract inside and out and have your legal toolkit as a business owner loaded with documents to help you. Don't just have your client contract in place. I want you to have additional documents at your disposal as well, should these type of situations come up with clients. Make sure if you haven't purchased your cancellation agreement yet, you can head over to thelegalpage.com/cancellation. Again, that's thelegalpage.com/cancellation and get 2 cancellation contracts in our cancellation bundle. One for when you need to cancel as the service provider for being sick or injured, or you need to for a personal emergency. And one, of course, for when your clients voluntarily cancel. Cancellations can be nerve-wracking at times, and that's why it's really important to have everything in writing, not just in an email. And you need to know your rights with cancellation. So as a business owner, it's your duty to protect yourself and your business at the end of the day. So I always suggest that you have cancellation contracts in your legal toolkit for situations like this that we've discussed in this episode today. And finally, also remember, my team and I are always watching things unfold in the news. We're always on top with what's going on in the industry, and we have questions in our TLP community on Facebook. If you're not a part of it, please come join us. You can just type it into the search bar, where service providers are asking these questions right away, right when they're happening. So if monkeypox or any other public health emergencies take a wild turn for the worse, We will be updating you and helping you handle any sticky situations that may arise. And if you have any questions, remember to join that Facebook community that I talked about. It's called the TLP community on Facebook, because it's really the go-to resource for industry professionals to ask their questions in a group environment whereby me and my legal team can answer them for you without having to pay us. It's really a win-win for you. So please join us there if you have any additional follow-up questions from this episode, because I know your questions would also benefit so many others that are probably thinking the same thing. My friends, thanks for sticking with me, and I will chat with you over in the next episode next week. Thank you so much for listening to the Legal Paige podcast. I am beyond grateful for you, which is why I want to give you a coffee or your favorite bevy on me. If you leave a 5-star rating and review for the Legal Paige podcast on iTunes, screenshot the review and send it to me on Instagram at The Legal Paige. That's The Legal Paige. I will send you a Starbucks gift card from me. Just make sure to include your email in the DM. So again, send a screenshot of the review to me on Instagram at The Legal Paige, include your email address, and I will send you some Starbucks, because what better gift than caffeine for every business owner? Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Legal Paige podcast. See, I told you being legally legit isn't so scary. Be sure to visit thelegalpaige.com for all show notes. And it would be super awesome if you could head over to iTunes and leave a review. Last but not least, don't forget to join my free Facebook group for unlimited legal and biz Q&A. Chat soon, Legal Pagers.